Hi. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm David Worden, formerly the solo euphonium with the U.S. Coast Guard Band, and now I'm working with computers, and when I have time I do a lot of music things, including videos. You'll find many on YouTube, where this one is right now. Today though, I'm not going to play. I'm going to talk about cleaning your euphonium. A clean horn is very beneficial to the player, and it does some wonderful things like making the horn easier to play, keeping the valves working, and keeping the horn from just rotting out. So it's something you want to do as often as possible. Here is my pacing of my cleaning. I like to do my most frequent cleaning about once a week, but this is very painless, very quick, and easy to do. Thanks to a tool called Spitballs. This is the large size, which is good for euphonium. It's a size 15. I'll get a close-up view of this. This product is made by Herco. It's probably available in your local music store, or Amazon has it as well. As always, I encourage you to buy from your local music store if possible. There are great things to have around these music stores, and we need their support often. Many of them have repair shops and things like this we may need to buy at the last minute, where even Amazon can't get it to you quick enough. So I'm going to start by taking out the tuning slide of the instrument. The Spitballs are really designed to go through the small parts of the horn. By the time it gets to the tuning slide and beyond, the horn is larger than the spitball can really clean, so there's no sense going that far with it. Taking the mouthpiece out, I'm also going to get a rag, because when the spitball comes out of the horn, it's going to be wet. That's partly because when it goes into the horn, it's wet. These are sealed in, packed in some kind of a gel, a liquid or gel. I'm guessing there's some glycerin in it to help it slide through the instrument very easily. Back to the close-up camera here. So the first thing I'm going to do is wrap this cloth around the receiver to help catch any drips, kind of like a bib. I'm going to insert the spitball into the receiver, push it in a little bit with my finger. Now this part is key to using these successfully. The first time I did this, I put the spitball in, it was probably that far in, put the mouthpiece in and blew it, and I could not get it to move. It really has to be a ways down inside the lead pipe to build some compression behind it as you blow. So I just use a cleaning swab like this, or a flexible snake will do it too. And this is only going to go as far as the curve, obviously, because it's not very flexible, but that's far enough. So I'll push it in there. Then I put my mouthpiece in, and I'll rearrange this rag so it catches it, I hope. I'm going to do this one through all 4 valves. That covers almost every tube in the instrument. There's some crossover tubes. I'm not quite sure if it goes through in this position, so sometimes I do it with the horn open or with just the 4th valve pushed. But for now, we'll do all 4. Now this horn hasn't been played for 2 weeks because of some dental surgery I had. Before that, I did a recital at ITech and played just a little bit to practice afterwards, and otherwise it's been sitting, and I did not clean it after that. Now, in this case, I'm doing very well because the spitball, really a cylinder, but spit cylinder just doesn't sound good, came out fairly clean. I'll put it in the close-up camera, and you can probably see a little bit of darkness around one edge of it. That's where it picked up a little junk as it went through the instrument. Usually I'll clean this until I don't see anything coming out on the spitball, so it comes out nice and yellow all the way around. Today I won't do that, but you can do that fairly inexpensively. I think this bottle of 25 or so cost me about $5, something like that, so it's pretty cheap to do. As I say, I do this every week. Now, at some point, perhaps every month, you're going to want to take the horn a little more apart, but still not completely apart. For now, I'm going to put the tuning slide back on. And the next thing we're going to tackle is the valves. I'm going to start with the fourth valve just because that's easiest to get out. So we want to look for several things on the valves. First thing we want to do is have the surface of the valve clean. That's fairly obvious, instinctive. Take a lint-free cloth. Actually, microfiber cloths are very good for this. And again, you can buy those in packages of quite a few for not very much money. Microfiber cloths' main advantage is they don't have any lint. They won't leave threads and things like that behind if you get fairly decent ones, although they still don't cost very much. So that gets the outside of the valve looking pretty good. The next thing I check is down in here. This is where the spring normally seats. I'll get a spring out here. So the spring actually goes inside the valve somewhat, because there's a small compartment, you might say, in there. The spring needs to be seated in there. We'll talk about that as I put the horn back together. But it just sits in there like that. Now, for some reason, the fourth valve doesn't get too yucky this way, but valves 1, 2, and 3 seem to much more, where anything that you blow through the instrument or anything that forms as you're playing the instrument, which can be a combination of your saliva, your body chemistry, things you've eaten recently, so try not to eat right before you play or brush your teeth if you do. It can vary a lot from person to person because of that chemistry. It can also vary a lot depending on the instrument you play, what brand it is, what materials they use, and the type of valve oil you use. What I found, though, is if I start seeing debris inside here, that tells me I'm going to want to take the bottom cap off as well and clean in it. Now for this one, it's got just a little bit inside it. And again, my little swab brush is handy for that sometimes. Or a cloth, if you just sort of turn it around till you get a nice little corner to put in there, that can work as well, to clean that off. If you found something in there, that usually means that you need to check the bottom cap as well. So we'll take that off right now. The bottom cap on my Adams here is a heavyweight cap, so it looks a little different. It looks more like a can. It's really just a valve cap. It's just deeper than most of them are. Or I shouldn't say deeper, it's thicker than most of them are. So inside the valve cap now I'm seeing a little bit more debris. Still not real bad. I'll put it in front of the other camera and turn it slightly. Not very attractive. Frankly, that much debris is probably not going to cause trouble, but I'm going to clean it out anyway. I see some on the threads, so I'm using my cloth to do that. And I'll use a cloth for the whole thing just to show that that works too. So every place there's a line in here which creates a groove, we want to clean that out carefully. If anything is stuck where you just can't get it out, try a wooden toothpick. That will usually get in those corners and clean things out. Or you can soak it for a while, that works too. So now that is clean. The problem is, especially in the first 3 valves, as I say, as you play the instrument, those valves are sitting upright like this. As they move up and down, any debris that might go through them or around them tends to collect down here. So at this point, I'm going to look at the spring, by the way. I forgot to mention that before. Here's another cloth that I use. This still isn't microfiber. Shame on me. I should have that, but I don't have it in my portable kit here. So I'll just go around the bottom where the spring kind of winds to a little tail there. I'll try to get the cloth in between the coils and just turn it like this, turn the spring so it winds the cloth out. I'll do it over here in front of this camera. So I put the cloth in like this, turn the spring, and you'll see the cloth makes its way to the top and slides off. So that helps to get anything caught in here. As I mentioned before, when debris catches in here, it causes trouble. That's because the spring is moving up and down in there. It's compressing and releasing. As I mentioned before, when debris collects in there, it can cause trouble. That's because the spring, when it's seated in the cap, is moving up and down as you play. That may kick out some of the debris back up into the valve. And if it's had a chance to solidify or harden or just clump a little bit down there, it'll be a piece large enough to cause the valve to stick. And that's pretty inconvenient, as you all know, I'm sure. So, procedure is wipe off the valve, check the bottom of the valve inside, the part down here, make sure it's clean. If it's not just beautifully clean, then you want to check the inside of the bottom valve cap as well, make sure that's clean. Make sure your spring is clean. Having done that, we're almost done. We will look at the valve a little bit more though. In some cases, depending I think on the valve oil or possibly your own body chemistry, I used to have this problem, but I don't now, and I've switched oil, so I assume it's not totally chemistry. Anyway, you can get a little buildup around this chamfer where the valve's cut kind of like this on the end. It's got a little angle there. So if you see something in there, often you can scrape it off with your fingernail, and you should. If that doesn't work, you can try a popsicle stick or even a plastic spoon. Use the spoon part, which has got a little sharper edge generally, and it's not going to hurt the valve, and scrape that off there. Check the bottom the same way. There's a chamfer there as well. Check on that. Look at the top of the cap, or top of the valve, excuse me, the piston, this is. You'll find a hole in the top of the piston. There's also a hole in the bottom of the piston. And that lets the air flow through the piston as you move the valve up and down. Otherwise it would get quite sluggish. So that hole should look open. You also want to make sure that this top pad, if you've used an aftermarket pad, doesn't cover the entire hole, which can happen sometimes. We'll get a close-up shot of that now. So this looks like it's in pretty good shape, not much dirt there. I also use my fingernail usually just to go beside the valve guide here, the plastic guide, or some horns have a metal guide, just on the side to make sure nothing is caught there. By the same token, every now and then there's a groove for this guide inside the valve. You may want to run a cloth in there with your finger, pushing against that groove to try to coax anything out. If that doesn't work, again, a popsicle stick or a plastic spoon, you might have to break it or cut it to make the right shape. Can get down in there and clean it, but that doesn't happen very often if you're doing the regular maintenance along the way. So now an important part of this maintenance is putting the valve back together. I don't just mean that we want it back together, obviously we do, but it's how we put it back together. A lot of people on my forum, if you've not been there yet, I have a forum on my website, which is dworden.com. We have a discussion forum there that has a lot of good information. And several times people will complain on there that their valves are noisy. It can be caused by many things. First of all, I helped avoid the noise by using springs that are coated. They have a plastic coating. So that helps them, if they do happen to touch the sides, it doesn't make as much noise. There are a couple different kinds I know of. Yamaha makes a set that's fairly inexpensive if you don't need a long spring or a strong spring. They're fairly light. This is one of the Mead springs, which are much more expensive but very well made. So even without this though, the valve can be quiet. If I put it back in, now the bottom cap is on already. Inside the bottom cap there's a depression, and you want the spring to sit in that depression. As I'm looking down there, I want to see that the spring is sitting upright, that it's not leaning over to one side. Now, we'll assume we've oiled the valve, which I should have done before but didn't. We're going to put the valve back in. As you get down to where it's contacting the spring, I like to turn it or even bounce it a little bit. The reason I'm doing that, I'm going to back things out again here to show you. Now remember, this valve, this piston, is going down inside the cylinder, right up against the cylinder wall. So there's an edge here on all sides. Sometimes the spring can lean over a little bit and get caught on that edge like this. That'll cause the spring to bend, and as it bends, it tends to bow out, and it can touch the side of the piston. As it bows out, it can touch the side of the cylinder. So we want to make sure it's seated in the bottom. As we put the valve in, then we want to turn it or bounce the valve off the spring a little bit to give it a chance to unseat itself from the edge and get inside the hole there where it belongs. So we'll start again. The most critical part of that, if you don't do this, you can have a heck of a time making this work, is to make sure that the cylinder is upright. Otherwise, if I put the valve in when it's like this, or lying on its stomach in this case, the spring, of course, is laying on the side, and it's going to be tough to get it seated properly in the bottom or the top. So So we'll start again, get it down there, put the valve in, turn it some, bounce it a little bit till it feels right. I'm not hearing much noise. Then I'll find the guide and screw the cap back on. So that's all there is to it. So it took me a long time to explain that. But frankly, if the horn's pretty clean when I start, this all goes very quickly.